Well, it appears Craig's ultimate distraction of liquid glass is paying off, because we're not talking about the shortcomings of Apple Intelligence today like they would hate for us to do, but we're talking about how much Gaussian blur is really acceptable, because in the latest iOS 26 Beta 3, they've essentially nerfed liquid glass, turned up the AC a little bit, froze all of this liquid, and now we have frosted glass. Let's begin. So if you scroll back and watch my video about how liquid glass is kind of the ultimate distraction, this is kind of perfectly painting that picture, and I think it was engineered from the beginning. Apple knew, they're not dumb, right? Like, they knew this was going to tick off some people with the readability concerns, with the light refractions. They probably had a firm understanding that this was going to divide the community, and then, during the course of the beta period, all of these beta testers feel like they all have a say, or they all have some input, because obviously the day one beta was quite a battery drain with liquid glass, all of that light refraction, calculating how much the background should curve around the menu buttons at the bottom, and how the colors should be impacted by Control Center. A bunch of people complained on day one about liquid glass, and then a few generations go by and they turn it way down, now getting to the point where people were used to the ultra shiny, ultra transparent, kind of hard to read liquid glass, and now they update to Beta 3 and a bunch of people complain about it. Now you've got people who are on the opposite side of the aisle saying that this basically removes all of the changes, it's not as interesting visually anymore, and they absolutely should change it back. Huge journalists in the industry like Mark Gurman already saying it's crazy how Apple could work on a redesign for the UI after all this time, only to have a couple of weeks basically of complaining on social media completely undo all of this progress. So then of course they found a new way to divide the tech community. Some people want ultra shiny, hard to read liquid glass. Some people are like, why are you changing it at all? Just preserve my battery life, because it at least appears that the earlier versions of liquid glass were absolutely decreasing battery life faster than before, because you're calculating all of these extra animations and graphics. And then likely you get some middle ground people that are like, no, there's a simple solution. Apple should just let us choose, right? We just need more customization options. So you should be able to go into accessibility settings and have a little slider that says, how melted do you want your liquid glass to be? Do you want it to be like pouring out of the screen by just having the most translucency possible and just have all these bubbles and liquids floating around the display? Or do you want to turn it up and increase the readability, probably increase the battery life by having less light refractions to calculate on the GPU, and then just have everything in between and have a slider that lets you adjust how easy or how beautiful you want the UI to be? And Apple probably knew from the beginning that there was no right answer. There's probably going to be people that say, no, a slider is going to get too confusing and too complicated. There should just be one standard option for liquid glass, or liquid glass should just be removed entirely. And then you have people who want the Beta 1 approach to liquid glass, and now you'll have people that want the Beta 3 approach, which is better for battery life and easier for readability. And all of this banter, all of this back and forth was the ultimate setup to get people off of the Apple Intelligence is a big letdown train, right? Like, there's no way I think that Apple was cooking up liquid glass for several months and thought that everybody was gonna like it from day one. No, they knew they could tie up the developer beta community by overcorrecting and then maybe going backwards a little bit, trying to find a sweet spot, and they knew all of these techies and journalists were gonna feel like they were all voting on this, and it was gonna feel like they had a big impact on how Apple was implementing the user interface. It's clever, honestly. I don't think this was an accident. I don't think the change in Beta 3 was something they never thought was going to happen, or something that they only thought about once the first initial reviews came out. They were like, no, we need to have something that fills up dub and makes it feel like we have a lot to announce that day. But even if it ends up being completely reversed, then in a sense, the marketing team kind of finished their job, right? Because there's a certain amount of things that they need to announce at dub in order to justify, the 90-minute presentation. So you can take up a bunch of time at the event and on the website with liquid glass, and then a few months later kind of throw it all under the rug and be like, you know what, it turns out let's just not change it all that much because it hurts battery life and it makes it harder to read. But they still had an event. They were still in the news for a while. People still talked about it for a while, even if it ended up not being delivered on, which in a sense is kind of what they did before with Apple Intelligence. Fills up so much stage time, it fills up so much marketing talk with their greatest hopes and aspirations on how to make iOS OS better, and then if you don't deliver on it, then you just come up with something else to distract people with the following year. Like, oh no, like we'll talk more about that later, but let's talk about this for now, and we'll get back to that other stuff we announced previously at a later date. So that's kind of the sad, perpetual story we're in with Apple software right now. It's the art of distraction, and I think ultimately it's not really the software teams at Apple that are to blame. This is executive decision making and marketing mistakes that result in an underappreciation, in my opinion, for the software team. I think what's really happening is software is hard, okay? It's challenging, and most people, even executives and marketing people at companies, don't understand how complicated it is to patch bugs and how complicated it is to do things that the everyday person thinks is simple. Like, why can't you just make the whole UI more shiny and reflective? Or why can't you just put generative AI models on the phone that can, like, rewrite emails and come up with cringy images? We think these things are simple, and you can just tell a software team to get that done within the next couple of months, when in reality, it's very, very hard to project how long software projects are going to take, especially when they've never been attempted before, and I'm sure it's very difficult when you're building software that has to run on hundreds of millions, if not billions of devices across the world. There's a lot of refinement, there's a lot of testing that goes into that, but the arbitrary timelines on software development is very hard for marketing teams to understand, because marketing people and the executives on the board at Apple and the shareholders, of course, they want deliverables within very specific timelines. Like, by this time, you guys need to have this done and ready, or by this quarter, we need to have this finalized and complete. And the very complex, underappreciated field of software development does not fit very well in the structured timeline that marketing and executives want deliverables achieved by. That's why you get over-promising from software these days and under-delivered, because this stuff is challenging. It's not like Apple doesn't have some of the best paid software engineers in the world. It's just a lot of uncharted territory being explored at once, and a lot of unrealistic expectations being set by shareholders, executives, and marketing people. But not to worry, Apple's head of AI, I'm sure, is working hard on actually fixing a lot of the, oh, wait a second, he just got poached by Meta. Shoot. Well, you can't blame him. He was probably offered like $100 million as a sign-up bonus, but not to worry. I'm sure Apple will find someone else who could probably easily do a better job than whatever that guy was doing at AI with Apple. But feel free to let me know your thoughts on the change-up with Liquid Glass and Apple kind of stagnating with software features down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you all in the next one.